be here today. I live in London, so it's a little warmer here, a little nicer weather, so it's nice to be over here in Boston. My name again is Stan Stalnaker, and I'm the founding director of a social network called Hub Culture. I have this kind of knack for being really, really early with things, but not necessarily the biggest with things. But the upside of that is that we get to talk about being early on some next things today. So a little bit about Hub Culture. It was one of the first social networks. It began in 2002, and it was very different from anything out there because we were one of the first websites to collect real people and connect real people. And our ethos has always been about two things. One, a mission to kind of expand collective consciousness, and two, the ability to connect with people in real life. And so the evolution of our network has been around the real world, and through a network of spaces that we've created over the years. We've done over 35 spaces that we call hubs in places as diverse as Rio and Beijing and Ho Chi Minh City and Venice, and then hundreds and hundreds of events that connect our members together. So that's 2002, Hub Culture. But while I had my day job, we started thinking about how you actually connect people in real life and then monetize aspects of that when you don't have bank accounts or financial services in places where you show up for a week or 2 weeks or a month or something like that. And so in 2007, we launched the first digital currency, VEN. This actually came out of a problem because we had done an event in Greece. Everybody showed up. One of the people took the credit card numbers, but they didn't get the back of the credit card number, so we couldn't process over $10,000 of event transactions. And we said, this is not working for a business. So we invented a digital currency that people could buy online and then trade to each other and hold in a stored value wallet and then be able to redeem at our physical locations. We were the first digital currency in the world to be used outside of a virtual realm and in a kind of digital real world space. And then from that, we really evolved. And in 2009, we went to what we call a basket float, where the currency became made up of a bunch of different assets, which include currencies and commodities, and quite crucially, carbon. And the introduction of carbon created the world's first environmental currency, a currency that supports basically the environment. So from there, Bitcoin came along, and we started thinking about identity, because this was something that we didn't realize was super important, but was actually core to ourselves because of the social network. And the identity piece really was actually developed with MIT in a series of meetings that happened in 2014 and 13 up at Bretton Woods. And we kind of showed up very much like we've all showed up today, kind of wondering what it was all about. And we left with this like aha moment realization that people need to own their own identity, and they need to be able to own and control their own data. And 4 or 5 years ago, this was not an obvious conclusion. It wasn't something that a lot of people were thinking about, but it really changed and shifted our view of how our members and our community relates to data that they are in fact generating themselves. And we took this stand with something called the Windhover Principles, that all of our members should be able to own and control their own data. And from that, Hub ID was born. So Hub ID is now the world's most scalable and granulated digital identity system. A person who has an account with Hub Culture or a wallet with VEN is able to generate little bits of data into their Hub ID and have that tokenized into essentially a digital chain of data that is then readable but still private and secure. And this is really important because the idea of digital identity is now really fundamental and central to almost everything that's happening with regard to blockchain and the web. And that's because you need to have some form of identity to make a value payment. So together, the growth of Hub ID and VEN have become this kind of synchronous system that helped to build on top of each other. Then in 2017, we started thinking about data and the blockchain, and also just the growth of AI. And so we realized that we needed an AI. Zeke was about the last name you could get with a .ai format, but it also has some resonance to us. And so Zeke became our system intelligence. And we've been training this collection of APIs and services out of the social network and off of VEN-related transactions. And what kind of evolved out of that was this idea that really Zeke is going to become the central focus of a lot of what we do over time. And the reason that's happening is that we're looking at data generated by Zeke, whether it's an input to the AI or an output response from the AI, and we're basically putting that on a blockchain. And we call the bits of data that we put on the blockchain specs. And so the idea is that Zeke generates and uses specs, and that you can attach digital currency in the form of Venn to those specs and create effectively a market system for data that is really around micropayments and micro use of data related to the currency. And so this is very much like a new area for us because it takes a lot of work to build it. But every bit of data that Zeke generates is essentially being recorded onto, right now, what is a block of data that gets cryptographically wrapped. So we created something called the Open Audit Initiative that looks at the data that's coming through the network for Venn, and it records all those transactions cryptographically. And then all the data that's coming from Zeke, and it records that data cryptographically. So the natural conclusion from that was a single block of data isn't really sufficient. We need to actually have a network of data, a blockchain for data. And so from that was born Ultra, which is a new project which we've been developing since really last summer. And just phase one launched actually last week. And so phase one of Ultra is a centralized crypto exchange that's trading a bunch of different assets, but is really linked to the tokenization of everything. And what we're trying to build with Ultra is a blockchain that runs not on a particular kind of fuel. So up until now, all blockchains have run on one fuel. So the Ethereum blockchain runs on Ether, the Bitcoin blockchain runs on Bitcoin, the Ripple kind of blockchain runs on Ripple. So with Ultra, what we're trying to build is an open system. It's an open source project that takes lots of different types of fuel. In fact, a fuel that you could generate yourself by putting a tokenized asset onto the blockchain. So the first things that we're doing are what we call Ultra US dollars, Ultra euros, Ultra commodities, and Ultra securities. These will become essentially tokenized off of the data coming from the old legacy world into the new decentralized blockchain world of Ultra, and then pushed onto the network. And the idea is that you would be able to not just use our currency, Venn, but any type of fuel that you can create to power the activities of this blockchain. We're still pretty early on it, but I'm happy to say that some meetings with Thomas Harjono and with Sandy last year really helped us think about, again, the kind of mission and ethos of all of this. And so I guess the kind of ending point here would be like, what is the point of doing all of these things? And how does that relate to you and to the bigger picture of society? I've become really interested now in the next big thing. So I think this is probably a 2025 concept where you're really going to see it taking root. But it's really this idea of what I call mesh governance. And so mesh governance is a kind of system governance that's almost organic and potentially not controlled by any single system controller, but as Narup just said, the nodes in the network all contributing to something larger than itself. And we've really seen this happening among the networks that we know. So we know the MIT network, we know the Nexus network, which is really harnessing millennial wealth against impact investing. We know the Davos network, we know the Summit Series network, we know networks in Rwanda and in Hong Kong and all around the world. And increasingly, everybody's thinking like a network. And the nodes connected together are actually forming a singular system. And so what we're really interested in now is how do we actually start to create the tools that allow mesh governance between those networks to be able to act independently and resolutely. A lot of this is going to come from blockchain, but another big component of it is just going to be about building governance systems that enable everyone to participate. And so we think that this is actually going to come from governance from governments who are interested in scaling exponentially. So one example of this is work that we're doing in Bermuda, which is our home market. Bermuda has 60,000 people, but it has the rule of law and it has the governance of essentially a nation state. And what they're looking to do, and what we're helping them do, is think about how you do open scaling at exponential levels. So we're building basically a cloud governance model for Bermuda that's going to be exportable and scalable. And then we're looking at Estonia and Luxembourg and Singapore and other markets where they're also building these digital governance structures and looking at how we can mesh those things together for a kind of mesh governance. And so the view is that probably by 2025, all of us in this room will be able to have some form of light citizenship that goes beyond the country that we live in now. And this has sort of always been the ultimate dream of hub culture. We've seen hub culture from the very beginning in 2002 as a place where international, globally minded people can come together, create value for each other, and move that forward. And this idea of mesh governance is the way that that's going to happen. You'll be able to pick and choose attributes between nation states and services from nation states that cascade down to companies, individuals, and networks to be able to create the kind of life and society that you want to live in. And our hope is that by working together with all of you, we're going to be able to build that in an equitable way that brings benefits to everybody on the planet. So no matter where you are in the network or in that mesh, you'll be able to benefit. So that's what we're thinking about.